Okay, we're going to do a rough sketch of this function right here, which the parent function is just the sine of x. Sine of x has an amplitude of 1, which means it rises 1 unit above its midline and 1 unit below its midline. And this basic sine function, this line, the x-axis, is the midline. And the period of the basic sine function is 2 pi. So every 2 pi units, this little graph repeats. So for the given function, the amplitude is 3. That's this number right here. If it was negative something, then the graph would be reflected through its midline. This 1/2 in front of the x changes the period of the parent function. And that is, it's 2 pi divided by this number that's in front of x. So 2 pi divided by 1/2 is 4 pi. And this 4 out to the right causes everything to shift up 4, including the midline. So since you're doing a sketch, let's just see what we can do here. I would suggest first drawing a lightly dashed line at y = 4. We're going to move this midline up 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And then maybe some other dashed lines 3 units above and 3 units below the midline. So here we are at y = 7 is the maximum value that the function can reach. And here we are at y = 1, 3 units below the midline. Again, why 3? Because that's the amplitude. That number is how high above and below the midline the function travels. Now we've got to go out to the right here and label some point 4 pi. That's going to be the end of one period. And then we divide that into half. Half of 4 pi is 2 pi. And then each of these little intervals here, from 0 to 2 pi, divide that in half. And from 2 pi to 4 pi, the average is 3 pi, or the midpoint. And that's where these key points are going to be located. So we know that the basic sine function starts here, climbs up 1 unit at this quarter point. But here we're going to start the sine function here at 0, 4 on the midline. We're going to climb up to the maximum at the quarter point, back to 0, or back to the midline, I should say, at the halfway point, down to the low point at the 3/4 point, and then finally back to 0. So a rough sketch would look something like this. There's one period, although the period is 4 pi. Period, you do the same thing. Put 2 pi here. Half of that is pi. Half of, or the midpoint from 0 to pi is pi over 2, and so on. And then if you want to go out here and do another period, you put something like 8 pi out here. Divide this interval from 4 pi to 8 pi. Get the midpoint, add those together, 12 pi. Half of 12 pi is 6 pi. The midpoint of between 4 pi and 6 pi is 10 pi divided by 2, or 5 pi. And the midpoint of 6 pi and 8 pi is 7 pi. And then you kind of can picture these quarter points on the midline. And we know that we're going to climb up to the max, back to the midline, down to the low point, back to the midline. So there's another period. Again, a fairly rough sketch. Okay, and you could come this way out here if you wanted to. You could come to negative 4 pi. Do the midpoint, 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 and draw the same picture going in the reverse direction. There you go. Hope that helped. If you have any questions, post a comment.